Hello everyone, welcome to my channel SW Metro official channel.
Finally, bank authorities seize and seal Kody's favorite car for non-payment of loan. Finally, bank authorities have seized and sealed Kody Brown's favorite car for non-payment of a loan, and while on the surface this might seem like a routine financial repossession, for fans of sister wives and followers of the Brown family saga, it feels like a symbolic culmination of years of reckless spending, misplaced priorities, and a lifestyle that always seemed unsustainable under the bright lights of reality television. Kody, who once proudly flaunted his big family image, his sprawling dreams of developing Coyote Pass into a polygamist utopia, and his ability to balance 4 wives and more than a dozen children while driving vehicles that reflected his sense of status and control, has now been forced into a humiliating corner, his prized car hauled away not by choice but by legal enforcement. And the irony is not lost on longtime viewers who remember how often Kody equated possessions, mobility, and flashy displays with his authority as head of the Brown household. In many ways, this repossession represents not just a financial setback but a symbolic stripping of his patriarchal image, because cars, especially for men like Kody who project dominance and power, are not just transportation but identity markers, rolling metaphors of freedom, success, and authority. And when one is lost to the cold reality of non-payment, it reveals a vulnerability that no amount of bluster, television confessions, or spiritual justifications can hide. Of course, the bank's move to seize and seal the vehicle did not come out of nowhere. Repossession is always the result of months, sometimes years, of missed payments, extensions, penalties, ignored warnings, and escalating interest. Which means that while Kody may have been projecting his usual bravado on camera or in interviews, behind the scenes he was likely juggling debts, unable to keep up with installments, perhaps shifting funds toward other priorities like legal fees, family obligations, or Robin's expenses, while allowing the car loan to drift into delinquency until the bank had no choice but to act, and that in itself tells a story of a man whose once tightly controlled narrative is unraveling. The fans have long speculated about the Browns' financial health, especially after the splintering of the family, the ex-wives finding independence, and the public revelations of Coyote Pass being sold off. And now this repossession provides concrete proof that Kody is not the untouchable patriarch he once portrayed himself as, but rather a man facing the same humiliations and consequences as anyone else who fails to honor financial commitments. Still, what makes this repossession sting more deeply is the personal connection between Kody and this particular car, described by those close to him as his favorite. The vehicle was not just another means of getting from A to B but his pride, his constant companion on long drives across Flagstaff, his symbol of escape when family drama boiled over, and perhaps even his last tangible link to the image of success he wanted to project to the world. So when the tow truck arrived and the authorities sealed it off, it was as if they were not just taking metal and wheels but dismantling a piece of Kody's persona, leaving him exposed, humiliated, and forced to reckon with a reality he can no longer deny. It's worth recalling that Kody has always had an almost theatrical relationship with money, on one hand proclaiming his love for independence, entrepreneurship, and self-reliance, while on the other hand consistently entangling himself and his family in questionable financial choices. From the overambitious purchase of Coyote Pass land to the expensive relocations that drained savings and caused endless stress among his wives, and this car repossession feels like the smallest but sharpest punishment, a visible, unavoidable reminder that his financial empire is not just fragile but collapsing. The public reaction has been swift and merciless, social media lit up with memes of tow trucks, sarcastic commentary about karma, and fans joking that maybe Christine, Janelle, and Mary should pull together to buy the car back just to parade it in front of Robin, while others expressed a deeper sadness, pointing out that financial ruin and humiliation are natural consequences of isolation, arrogance, and failure to build sustainable relationships, suggesting that Kody's downfall is not something to laugh at but rather a cautionary tale of what happens when one man insists on control while disregarding the needs and contributions of those around him. For Robin, who has stood by Kody while his world shrank, the car repossession must feel like a tightening noose, because while she may still have him physically, the man she fought to hold on to is now a diminished figure, stripped of his assets, stripped of his symbolic toys, and inching toward irrelevance, and one wonders how long she can continue to defend him when even the Banks are making statements louder than the ex-wives ever could. Symbolically, the image of Kody's favorite car being sealed is almost cinematic. Fans imagine him standing there, arms crossed, hair blowing in the Flagstaff wind, forced to watch as men in uniforms attach clamps, signatures, and seals that announce to the world, "This is no longer yours, you have failed to protect it, you have failed to pay for it, and you must now face the consequences." But beyond the drama, there is the practical question: what comes next for Kody Brown? Repossession of one car could be just the tip of the iceberg, suggesting larger debts, more unpaid loans, and perhaps even looming foreclosures, and if that is true, then the humiliation of losing his vehicle may only be the beginning of a financial unraveling that exposes the full extent of his mismanagement, his refusal to adapt, and his stubborn insistence on living beyond his means. And while some might argue that he still has television money and residual fame to fall back on, the truth is that without the support of multiple wives pooling incomes, and with public sympathy now turned almost entirely against him, his ability to maintain a lifestyle of status symbols is fading fast. Fans will no doubt continue dissecting every frame of this repossession, connecting it to Kody's past mistakes, contrasting it with Christine's current happiness and Janelle's newfound independence, and speculating whether Mary, who once tolerated his arrogance, is quietly reveling in this karmic reversal. But in the end, the fact remains, the bank authorities have spoken louder than any ex-wife, louder than any fan, and louder than any storyline TLC could script. Kody Brown failed to pay, and so they took what he loved, sealing away not just a car but a chapter of his life, leaving him to drive forward in nothing but humiliation, regret, and the dwindling fumes of a once grand dream that has now sputtered into a repossessed reality. Finally, the inevitable, long-dreaded reckoning arrived not with a dramatic showdown but with the sterile, bureaucratic precision of a certified letter and the low rumble of a flatbed tow truck idling in the driveway. For Kody, the seizure of his favorite car was not merely the repossession of an asset, it was a violent, public exhumation of a dream he could no longer afford to keep buried, a forcible extraction of his very identity as he had meticulously constructed it. The car, a low-slung, obsidian-black muscle car with a throaty, rumbling exhaust that sounded like bottled thunder and custom scarlet pinstripes that traced its curves like veins of lightning, was never just a mode of transport. It was the gleaming, polished centerpiece of his personal mythology, a tangible testament to the success he pretended to have and the man he desperately wanted to be. He had named it, talked to it, spent countless Saturday afternoons polishing its flawless surface to a liquid shine, not just maintaining a machine but performing a sacrament to the gods of status and cool. The loan had seemed, at the time of purchase, like a manageable entry fee into a better life, a series of digits on a screen that abstracted the true cost. He had sat in the plush dealer's office, intoxicated by the new car smell still clinging to his clothes, and signed the papers with a flourish, each signature feeling less like a financial commitment and more like an autograph on the contract of his future awesome life. The first missed payment was a small thing, a temporary blip blamed on an unexpected bill, a tight month. He soothed his anxiety by taking the car for a long drive, the powerful engine erasing his worries with every press of the accelerator. The second and third missed payments became a pattern, a secret he kept from everyone, even himself, by doubling down on his public displays of affection for the vehicle. He would park it conspicuously at the local hangout spot, the engine ticking as it cooled, a shiny monument to a lie he was still trying to sell, mostly to himself. The letters from the bank evolved in tone, shifting from polite reminders to stern warnings and finally to cold, impersonal notices of default. Each envelope, bearing the bank's logo, felt like a tombstone landing on his doormat. He'd hide them, shred them, try to ignore the mounting evidence of his impending collapse, as if by not acknowledging the words, he could negate their reality. He developed a nervous habit of glancing out the window every morning, not to check the weather, but to perform a silent inventory, to confirm his prize was still there, still his. The phone calls started next, their ringtone becoming a trigger for a cold sweat. He'd let them go to voicemail, listening to the increasingly grave messages from agents with friendly names like Sarah or Mike who spoke with the sympathetic but firm cadence of executioners offering last-minute reprieves for a price he could never muster. The morning it finally happened began with an unnatural quiet. There was no phone call, no final warning. Just the crunch of gravel under heavy tires that didn't belong. Peering through the blinds, Kody's heart seized. The sight of the tow truck, with its yellow flashing light muted in the dawn light, was more terrifying than any nightmare. Two figures emerged, a bank representative in a crisp, indifferent windbreaker and a tow truck operator with the weary, seen-it-all demeanor of a man simply doing his job. The representative's knock on the door was not angry, not triumphant, but devastatingly professional. The paperwork was presented, a forest of legalese and bolded fonts that all boiled down to one simple, brutal fact: the dream was over. His protests were weak, choked off by the undeniable authority of the documents. He had no legal ground to stand on, and they all knew it. The real agony was in the witnessing. He was forced to stand there, powerless, as the operator worked with efficient grace. The metallic clank of the wheel lift being positioned, the whir of the hydraulic winch, the sight of his beloved car, the car he'd cared for with a lover's devotion, being dragged unwillingly up onto the flatbed, its low front bumper scraping against the ramp with a sound that made him physically wince. It was a violation, a public stripping away. Neighbors peered through curtains. A kid across the street stopped riding his bike to watch the spectacle. In that moment, Kody wasn't a guy who'd defaulted on a loan. He was a little boy having his favorite toy taken away in front of the whole schoolyard, his failure made manifest and mobile. The operator secured the vehicle with thick straps, binding it tight, and with a final check, climbed into his truck. The slow, jarring procession of the tow truck carrying the black muscle car down the street and out of the neighborhood was a funeral march for a version of Kody that ceased to exist in that moment. The silence it left behind was deafening, a void where once there had been the potent symbol of his identity. The empty space in the driveway wasn't just a parking spot, it was a crater, a negative space that screamed of absence, poor decisions, and financial ruin. The weight of his self-delusion crashed down upon him with paralyzing force. All the excuses, the bluster, the polished exterior he maintained, it was all gone, towed away with the car. He was left with the unsexy, brutal math of his situation, the debt that remained even though the asset was gone, the ruined credit, the shame that was now a permanent resident in his home. The sealing away of the car in some impound lot, a cold, concrete fortress where it would sit with other repossessed dreams, was the final, symbolic act. It was no longer his to touch, to wash, to drive. It was now bank property, a numbered item in an inventory, its fate to be sold at auction to the next dreamer who might make the same mistakes. For Kody, the seizure was a catastrophic failure, but also, perhaps, a brutal and necessary liberation. It was the end of a charade that had become too expensive to maintain. The fantasy was sealed away, yes, but in its place was the raw, unforgiving material of reality. He was forced to confront who he was without the shiny prop, a man standing in an empty driveway, with nothing left to hide behind, and nowhere to go but up from the rock bottom he had finally, conclusively, crashed into. The echo of the engine's rumble was replaced by the quiet, humiliating, yet ultimately clarifying sound of truth, and it was from this barren starting line that his actual life, stripped of its expensive illusions, would now have to begin.